This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we're in Parshat Bahar. It's a double Parsha this week, Bahar B'chukotai, right? As this year is not a leap year, so we don't have that extra month. We need to condense our Parshiot that we start and finish on Simchat Torah. So this is one of the classic double Parshiot. And I want to focus on the first Parsha, mostly, on Bahar, and some interesting side lessons, I think, that can be gleaned. Okay, so why don't you, we're on page 696 in our Stone Chumash. Kathy, I have no voice. Why don't you start off in Hebrew, and then Cheryl will take it for us in English.
Okay. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe b'Har Sinai lamor. Deber el b'nei Israel ve'amarta alehem, ki tavo'u el haaretz asher ani noten lechem ve'shavta haaretz Shabbat la Hashem.
Continue, beautiful.
Shesh shanim tizla sadecha ve'shesh shanim tizmor karmecha ve'asafta et tavu'ata.
One more.
Vashana ha-shavi'it Shabbat Shabbaton Yeh la'aretz Shabbat laHashem Sadecha lo tizla v'charmecha lo tizmor.
Beautiful. Cheryl, you want to take it in English for us, please?
It seems to come up very often, this idea of the produce and the seventh year.
Yeah.
And
And we will discuss that. Take it first in English for us, Cheryl. Hashem spoke.
Hashem spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you, that the land shall observe a Sabbath rest for Hashem. For 6 years you may sow your field, and for 6 years you may prune your vineyard, and you may gather in its crop. But the 7th year shall be a complete rest for the land, a Sabbath for Hashem. Your field you shall not sow, and your vineyard you shall not prune." More?
Yeah, just finish the whole paragraph already.
Okay. The aftergrowth of your harvest you shall not reap, and the grapes that you set aside for yourself you shall not pick. It shall be a year of rest for the land. The Sabbath produce of the land shall be yours to eat for you, for your slave, and for your maidservant, and for your laborer, and for your resident who dwell with you, and for your animal, and for the beast that is in your land shall all its crop be to eat.
Beautiful. So this is the mitzvah of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year. And you can eat the fruits, you can eat the produce, but it's not yours, right? You can eat as long as everyone else can also eat. You can bring into your house as long as they're still available out in the field. That's verse 7. And for your animal and for the beast that is in your land. I can take in from my behemoth, my domesticated animals, as long as there still is produce outside in the fields for the wild beasts to eat, right? But I can't act as an owner. An owner, right? I put my fences around and no one else is allowed in. And then I take it and I make the profit. That I cannot do. What I want to focus on in the very first pasuk is very, very strange, because the most common verse in the entire Torah is clearly Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Hashem spoke to Moses saying, and then they're going to be different mitzvot or whatever instructions there are. And here we have Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Bahar Sinai lemor. Hashem spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, saying. Now, right, almost all the mitzvot were said on Mount Sinai, were taught to Moshe on Mount Sinai. So why are we specifying Mount Sinai over here? Rashi phrases the question, which Ora will tell me if I'm correct, I think is a modern Israeli phrase. If you want to say to someone, what does that have to do with anything? You say, Ma inyan shmita etzel har Sinai, right? Well,
Yeah.
right? You
Okay.
know, as a kid growing up, we used to say, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China, right? Like what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah.
So Rashi asks, and I love this part of Israeli society, that they've incorporated so much of the Tanakh into their just regular manner of speech. Ma inyan shmita etzel har Sinai. What does shmita have to do with har Sinai? Rashi asks. Hare kol mitzvot. All the mitzvot, Namru b'Sinai, were said by Sinai. So Rashi says, just like Shemitah, you should know that all of the klal, the general rules, and all of the pratoteha, diktukeha, all of the nuances, all of the details are from Sinai, from Sinai. So too, you should know all the mitzvot, even though there was some that were given at different points, but all the mitzvot were said in their generalities and in their details at Sinai. So therefore, in other words, Rashi seems to be saying the Torah needed to specify Sinai by at least one of the mitzvot in order that we should realize that Sinai, and of course we're counting now towards Shavuot, towards Mount Sinai, that holiday that recreates the Mount Sinai experience, right? That all of the mitzvot were said in their generalities and in detail at Har Sinai. Great. So for that, the Torah could have chosen any one mitzvah and put in the words, and God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, any one mitzvah would have then showed us that, oh, just like mitzvah X was said in totality on Mount Sinai, so to all the mitzvah on Mount Sinai. So my question to you is, why would the Torah, why might Hashem have chosen specifically the mitzvah of Shemitah to be the one that shows us that all of the mitzvot are from Sinai? Right? Again, we needed to do one to show that they all are. So we needed that X.
Okay.
X equals Shemitah. Why? Why is that? Yeah. All right, I think you were first.
Yeah. I'm wondering because it's every 7 years. So if this one is mentioned, then everything else that is more often required to do also is.
Interesting. This was only when kitavo el haaretz, only once we enter the land, and even then it's every 7 years, right? So certainly the more imminent, the more pressing mitzvot would have been all been said on Sinai. Beautiful. I never heard that idea before. That's a beautiful idea. That's a beautiful idea. Great. Cheryl, what did you want to say?
I have to put my thoughts in order. It's proving that Hashem is Hashem and he rules everything, because it makes no sense. And we have to trust that Hashem, like with the manna, with Shabbos, with everything, we have to trust Hashem because he said to do that. So it's really a trust thing.
Okay, so what the avenue you're going on, if I'm understanding you correctly, Cheryl, is you want to say, well, what is unique and somewhat overwhelming about this mitzvah that it was chosen? And what I think, what I'm understanding you're saying is this is a foundation of emunah, a foundation of trust in God, right? And that this is the seventh year comes. I bought this field. I've been working this field. All of a sudden comes the seventh year. It's not mine, right? And I'm not going to plant. I'm not going to do anything. Whatever grows, grows. But it's not for me. Now keep in mind, if I've got orchards, so they will produce fruits every year, right? But there are certain things that need to be planted every year. My wheat field doesn't just produce wheat every year. It's got to be planted. And this year I'm not planting. So I'm not going to have food on the seventh year. And for a good part of the eighth year, I'm not going to have food until I could first start planting it. Start planting in the eighth year. So this is really showing us this emunah, right? This is a real faith foundation of Judaism. And unless the person says no, this is just God being concerned about the land. This is Earth Day. This is ecology. That you can't deplete the resources of your fields, and therefore you've got to give it a break. You've got to give it a Shabbos. You have to give it 1 year off. Well, if that were the case, then the Torah would have simply said 1/7 of your property should not be planted each year. And that way your fields will have a chance to replenish their mineral supply, right? But you're not going to go hungry any 1 year. On the contrary, we want this to be a Shabbos for the field and a Shabbos for you, right? And you have time to involve yourselves in all those study materials that you've always wanted to get around to. Now you have a year to do it. You have a year to dedicate. You've got your sabbatical, right? It's interesting how the General Society has taken this concept of a sabbatical in order to have the time, right? You're working, you're teaching, you're doing what you're doing, but you need the time to replenish your own supplies, right? Your own storehouse, right? So this is all about this idea of emunah. Yes, Ora.
To expand on what Cheryl said, I think this particular mitzvah is about our sustenance. And so it is very basic to our survival, and that's why we need to have the faith that we will be supplied.
Yeah. Nice. And as Cheryl said, right, from here we go over to Shabbos, right? If I can go a year without planting and I'll be okay parnasa wise in terms of my sustenance, I can certainly take 1 day off, Shabbat, and be okay in terms of my sustenance. Beautiful. And
Additionally, people tend to think of as theirs or closest to them the things they invest in most. And so since all the effort of planting and plowing and sowing and reaping and harvesting might make people think, oh, I did this. So again, more of the message that Hashem did this and it is not ours. We might tend to, after all the 6 years, think, oh, it is ours and forget.
yeah.
And so this is a clear message to just, when you sit back and see just what happens, as Cheryl and and you and Ora have said, then it becomes clear that Hashem is manifesting everything.
Beautiful, beautiful point, Janet. Right? So, this is a real labor-intensive aspect. I put all my effort from sunrise to sunset. I'm working this field, I'm sweating, and to recognize that that is Hashem's. Good, good. And I would just add a cherry on top to what all of you are saying, in that, we very often point out that the purpose of the mitzvot are to give us this constant Hashem awareness. Right? That's really the goal of the mitzvot, is that we recognize that we're in Hashem's presence and we're living in God's world. Well, I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody, and we were talking about the tragedy that happened in Miron, right? Of there are hundreds of thousands of people who gather at the gravesite, and crowd control is not what it should be. And I was there one year, and as you're getting close to the kever, I literally stood like this in order to make sure that I would not get too the pressure of the crowd was really so strong, so overwhelming. I'm not a little guy, I'm not the biggest guy, I'm not a little guy, but I felt the need to stand there and just protect my chest to make sure I wouldn't get, I could still, I could breathe.
Wow.
That's just how crushed it gets over there. But a person said to me, Rabbi, do you really believe that each of these 45 precious souls that bodies, I should say, that died, that the precious souls that ascended to heaven, that it was all that was their time to die? And I said that our belief is, unless you're putting yourself in what's called a makom sakana, right? A person can't jump in front of a truck going 100 miles an hour and say, well, I'm going to jump in front of the truck. If I'm supposed to die, then this is my time, and not. No, right? That will become your time. But if a person has not put themselves into a makom sakana, and even though it's a tough place, but it's not considered jumping in front of a Mack truck. So we believe it's God's world, and that these were 45 souls that were meant to ascend, and they ascended in a very holy place on a holy night when they were involved in a holy activity. But every mitzvah is meant to give us this awareness that we are in Hashem's world, in Hashem's presence. And certainly this mitzvah, because, as Janet said, it's something that we work so hard on, that's my land. No, it's Hashem's land. And because it's something that's so fundamental, like Ora said, that's my sustenance. Yeah, but that's what comes from Hashem. And like Cheryl said, this is what builds our emunah, right? And it's from these emunah situations that we do relate to that help give us the strength to have that emunah when we go through those situations that we're scratching our heads and saying, why would this happen? Why would such a thing happen? Rabbi Schwab makes another very, very interesting point as to why we wanted to connect Shemitah to Sinai. And he says that Shemitah is a very, very beautiful proof, almost evidence, to the validity of Sinai. Meaning there are those, many who will say, the Torah is a great book, all-time bestseller. Right? I like the Reader's Digest condensed version, right? But it's an all-time bestseller, right? But it wasn't written by God. That's a fable. Right? Oh, you really believe it's written by God? They will say. No, it was collective writings that were put together as this nomadic tribe is traveling through the desert. They're creating their society, they're creating their norms. And according to that view, they'll have to say, but in order to give it teeth, in order to make it really stick, so they put in all these by Daber Hashem al Moshe Lemor. And God spoke to Moses saying, and God spoke to Moses saying, and God spoke to Moses saying, in order to kind of make it appear that it all came from God, but nah, it was just, what we put together. So Rabbi Schwab says so beautifully. So let's say our group right here, we decide to get together and we're going to write a Torah. Let's make a religion. Let's make a religion together. And let's figure out some important things for this religion to have. Okay? So one of you says, we need to have some holy days. Oh, that's a great idea. Right? Every self-respecting religion needs to have some holidays. Okay, so let's have holidays. We could have Pesach, we could have Shavuot, we could have Sukkot. Great. One of you says, well, let's have some dietary restrictions because we need to build the character. We need to have some self-control. Oh, that's a good idea. Good idea. Dietary restrictions. Good. Okay, someone else says, great, let's have a time that we all get together. We all gather together, right? Because we'll all be spread. Right now, we're all traveling through the desert together. But God willing, we're going to be a successful people. We're going to spread out. We need to have a gathering place. Great idea. Let's pick a land. Eretz Yisroel. Great. Oh, a Beit HaMikdash. Wow. Oh, and we'll need some sacrifices. Great. Oh, perfect. We'll do sacrifices in that temple. Oh, it's really coming together. We're getting a really good religion over here. I really like it so far. This is solid. We can sell this. This is going to be good. This is going to be good. And let's have that everyone gathers together at the holidays at the temple. Whoa, genius. Who thought of that one? That was amazing. Great. And then all of a sudden I say, I'd like to make a suggestion. Sure, Rabbi. What do you think we should include in the Torah? Well, people work too hard. So I loved your Sabbath idea. That was great. Give them one day off a week. That was brilliant. But how about comes the seventh year, no one plants? Great idea, right? Except you're going to say to me, what are they going to eat? I say, oh, you thought I didn't think of that? Simple. We'll write in our book that we're going to call Torah. I think it has a nice ring to it. We'll write in our book that they don't need to worry. Enough will grow in the 6th year that it will cover them for the 6th, for the 7th, and for part of the 8th until they start planting again. That way they're all set. And what are you guys going to say to me? Not such a good idea, right? Because, Rabbi, you can't put into this Torah of ours a guarantee that you can't make good on that guarantee. So ma inyan Shemitah Eitzel Sinai? What is the connection of Shemitah and Sinai? Shemitah shows us that the entire Torah was given to us on Mount Sinai by God. Because only the one who can guarantee you'll have enough to eat for years 6, 7, and 8 can possibly write that in the Torah. Otherwise, you'd have to be crazy, suicidal, or bent on sabotaging your own mission of presenting a man-made Torah as divine. You're clearly sabotaging that by putting in there a guarantee that there's no way you can fulfill. And it's going to discredit and disprove what you're trying to present. And there are a number of such evidences that if a person or if a group of people were writing the Torah, there is no way that this would be included in that which they are writing, in that which they are presenting. Shemitah, I think, is the greatest one. Right? And Rabbi Schwab says that is why Shemitah was written to connect to Sinai. This is a clear fingerprint of the divinity, the divine origin and source of the Torah. Now, when we were having our little panel discussion here about what to include in the Torah, one of you guys had a great suggestion. Let's get everyone together, right? I was just in Florida. I got to see some of my kids and grandchildren. Hopefully this summer we're all going to get together, right? And getting together is amazing. Nothing like everyone getting together. And when it's not just the immediate family, it's the extended family. Wow. Let's get the whole nation together. 3 times a year, let's be Ola Regel. Let's all go up to the Beit HaMikdash. So if you look on page 512, we have this idea. 512, Ora, you probably have a different Chumash. It's in Shemot, Lamed Dalid, Chaf Gimel. Shemot chapter 34, Exodus 34, verse 23. And here we have it. The suggestion that one of you made for our Torah, it made it into the final draft. Unbelievable. Check it out, black and white. Shalosh Pa'amim Bashana. We have that page 512, chapter Lamed Daled 34, Pasuk Chav Gimel. Shalosh Pa'amim Bashana. 3 times a year. Yera'eh kol zechurcha et pnei ha'adon Hashem Elokei Yisroel. Wow. 3 times a year, all of the men have an obligation to see the Master God Elokei Yisrael, and the Gemara speaks about it's to see and to be seen. We experience, we present ourselves. Fantastic. But one of you raised a point, I think, when one of you suggested that. If all the men are all going to go to Jerusalem, that's leaving the women and children somewhat vulnerable, right? We don't always have the most friendly of neighbors, right? To this day, and also in the biblical times, we don't always have the most friendly of neighbors. I think, I'm not sure who it was who said it, that if the Arabs will put down their weapons, there will be no more war. If Israel will put down their weapons, there will be no more Israel. So how do we get all the men together in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim, right? Granted, Shavuot is only one day, fair enough, in and out. Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, 8 days. Pesach, 7 days. Imagine in present day Israel, all of the men, everybody knows, all of the men, the soldiers, you name them, they're all converging on Jerusalem for 8 days. None of them along Gaza, none of them along the Syrian border, none of them along our dear friends Hezbollah by Lebanon, right? No men, no protection there, right? Not such a good idea. I say, no problem. I've got it. Read the next pasuk. Chav Dalet. Ki orish goyim mipanecha. I will banish the nations before you. V'yerchavti et gvulecha. And your boundaries will be broadened. Great. Beautiful. So we've got the country. We've got broad boundaries. But right beyond those boundaries are not the friendliest of people. Not our closest, dearest Yedidim. No. You don't have to worry. The lo yachmod ish et artzecha. We'll put into this Torah that no man will covet your land. 3 times a year. And they know exactly when it is. It's on the calendar. It's not that all of a sudden there's this okay, everyone come down to Yerushalayim. No, it's on the calendar. They can plan months in advance, years in advance. It's all on the calendar. But don't worry. No one is going to covet your land when you go those 3 times a year. They'll be busy. They're going to have their own internal things that will be going on just at those times. No one's going to attack. You don't have to worry. That's what we'll put into our Torah. Once again, right? We put that into our Torah and we get people to believe us. It's going to last until that very first regel. When all the men go to Jerusalem and all the neighbors come streaming into the land, looting our farms, looting our houses, right? We're not going back again next regel. Who would put this into the Torah? Only the one who could fulfill such a guarantee. People writing a Torah, it would be suicidal. It would be sabotaging their own enterprise here by, hello Ken, good to see you, by putting in a guarantee that in fact would be suicidal.
Rabbi,
Yes.
so maybe the land wasn't coveted, but kind of skirts the line. Yom Kippur, 1973, when we were attacked.
Yeah.
So maybe our boundaries were the broadening part was fulfilled, but it's sort of hard, nations being preoccupied with other things. They specifically took advantage of that, knowing the calendar, as you say.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a hard one.
Which I think supports my point more than challenges it.
Okay.
Meaning you see clearly that nations, enemy nations, will take advantage of anything that they can, right? But at the time that we had a Beit HaMikdash, Janet, and we were being Ola Regel, we don't find that there were not any of these incursions. So yes, this is not saying that we will never be attacked, right? What this is saying is when you will have this temple, when you will be Ola Regel, when you will ascend on these 3 pilgrimage holidays, and all the men will gather in Jerusalem, you will be safe. Your land will be safe. There will not be these attacks. And that's what happened. Meaning the 2 temples stood all together for 430 years, 830 years. 410, the first temple, 420, the second temple. And certainly during the time of the first temple, we were all being Ola Regel, Kol Zechorcha. And they were not for 410 years, right? Times 3, right? Because of 3 regalim, 3 of the pilgrimage holidays. So we're talking about 1,230 times. The men all went to Yerushalayim, and it was not attacked. And we see from Yom Kippur what our enemies would love to do, how they would love to take advantage, how they did take advantage of the time when they thought that we would not be ready. Right? So this is not a guarantee, Janet, that you'll never ever be attacked on any holiday. This was a guarantee that when you have a Beit HaMikdash and you are Ola Regel, you will not be attacked. Okay? One last point, and then we might end a little bit early as my voice is. Let's go back to, one second. Give me 1 second, my friends. Let's go back to Parsha Shmini, Kashrut laws. Let's go to page 598, Vayikra Yud Aleph, Pasuk Dalet. Talking about the requirements of kosher, for animals to be considered kosher animals. Right, Perik Yud Aleph, Pasuk Dalet, 598, Pasuk 4. Right, Achatzel Lo Tochlu. Right, I'm sorry. Let's go to Pasuk Gimel 1 back. Right, which animals are kosher? 596. If it has split hooves, everything among the animals that has a split hoof, completely separated, and that brings up its cud, chews its cud, that one you may eat. Okay? Now we've got, all have great Talmudic minds. If the Torah just said that you can eat an animal that both chews its cud and has split hooves, what would you, esteemed rabbis, say if it has split hooves but doesn't chew its cud? Or if it chews its cud but doesn't have split hooves? What would you rule? Kosher or not kosher? Clearly not kosher, right? If we just said if it has both split hooves and chews its cud, it's kosher, then our great Talmudic minds discerned that nuance that you need two, and one without the other is not good. Yet, the Torah goes on, verse 4, but this you shall not eat, that chew their cud, or that have split hooves. If it's one or the other, it's a no-go. For example, the camel chews its cud, not split hooves, not kosher. Good. The hyrax, right? That is the shafan. In modern Hebrew, shafan, I think, is a rabbit, but I'm not sure what. I don't think we know for sure exactly what the shafan is. That too chews its cud, doesn't have split hooves, and the hare, right? That's what we call the rabbit. Our nevet. Why? Chews its cud, doesn't have split hooves. Fair enough. Of those three animals, the one that we know for sure what the Torah is referring to is the gamal. Verse 7, and the pig, for its hoof is split, completely separated, but does not chew its cud. Therefore, tamehu lachem, it is unclean. You're not allowed to eat. The Torah lists one animal as having split hooves and not chewing its cud. Okay, so remember, when we were writing our Torah over here, one of you suggested, we all agreed, we need to have some dietary laws, right? And we did. And we came up with this arbitrary chewing its cud, split hooves. Sounds good. Sounds biblical. I like it. We'll put it in. Great. And then I had the great idea. Let's list all the animals that have one and not the other. And let's list those and say you can't eat them. So at that point, as we're traveling through the midbar, through the desert, we have no idea about the Galapagos Islands and all the animals that are there that Darwin ended up visiting and building his theory on. Australia, kangaroos jumping around. We never imagined such animals. Hawaiian Islands, United States. Who knew what was here in the United States? Imagine the fact that this band of nomads traveling through a desert, they listed one animal as having split hooves and not chewing its cud. And here we are, the year 2021. With Google Map, we can zoom in everywhere. And we've scoured this entire planet, found the most remote islands, settled them. We're all over the place. We have yet to discover a single other animal which has split hooves and does not chew its cud. So who could put that into this Torah? We, the nomads traveling through the desert? Are we going to have any idea of all the animals on this planet? To state that there is one animal that now when it comes to the chewing the cud and not split hooves, we listed 3. The Torah lists 3. What are those 3? We're not sure what those 3 are. So we can't bring any proof from that. But when it comes to chewing to split hooves, not chewing its cud, 1. Chazir. That was in the Jewish year, 2448, I believe, when the Torah was given. And here we are, 3,000 years later. We've gotten a little better idea of what's on this planet, and it holds up. And it holds up. So you had a great idea. Let's put some kosher. Let's put some dietary restrictions in. But don't go out on a limb. Don't go out on a limb and say this is the only animal that is one of those 2 arbitrary things that we picked. This is the only one in the entire that has that 1 and not 2. How do we know? What do we know is in the desert? Forget about what's on. We didn't even know there were other lands at the time. So these are 3, what I like to call fingerprints. There's never going to be a proof of God. There's never going to be a proof. Mathematically prove to me that that this is whatever, that this smells good. Right? You're taking physical and trying to prove spiritual. Right? Mathematically prove to me that I think this is a nice watch. One's a feeling, one is matter, physics. There's no way that a physical world with our physical proofs are going to be able to prove something that is beyond the physical. And all these proofs, they're not proofs. To me, what they are is things that make this the most logical choice. Whereas the way in my mind, atheism is illogical. Atheism is, I know there is no God. You know there is no God. To me, even I think there is no God. To me, that's illogical. That's illogical for me to think. So then you are relying on a 1 in a billion zeros from here to the moon, literally, chance of us being here. Right? And the answers say, well, if there are a billion years and a billion universes and a billion, right? According to science, all the matter that we have in the universe together, right? With each of those going through a change every second, you're still not going to come out with the sophistication of a clementine. Forget about the sophistication of a human being or an animal with our eyes and all. I mean, what's going on in the cellular level with the clementine and with a mammal. I mean, it's just, and you name it. So to me, these are all fingerprints, indications that to me make this the most logical choice that a person can make. Prove it to me. I don't want logic. I want proof. So to that, what I respond is, how many decisions do we make based on proof? Right? We get married. Prove it to me that I'm going to have a happy, fulfilling marriage. No one could prove it to him. Yet we go ahead and we make our best choice. I choose this profession. Prove to me that I'll find it gratifying. Prove to me that it will be able to support my family. No one can prove anything. We get into our car to drive from point A to point B. Prove to me we're going to get there safely. We don't do anything based on proof. Everything we do based on our best call. And to me, things like this are fingerprints that to me makes what we are all doing here today the best call we can make. Okay, my friends, I'm going to call it over here. Those who can make it, I don't know what your schedule like today, the funeral today at 12 noon for Renee Levine is at Harbor Lawn. And there's probably not going to be that many people attending. So, or did you know Renee?
I knew Renee and Julie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I first met them at a Yom Tov at Cheryl and Morris's.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So, special woman. Julie was an amazing young lady. Yeah. Restricted to a wheelchair, but had just a real drive to her. So Julie passed away about 2 years ago, I think now. 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. And her mother just passed away. Funeral today at 12 o'clock, those who can join us at Harbor Lawn.
Giesler?
Or we don't, you're muted, Aura.
Is that on Giesler?
Yes, Giesler. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good seeing everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Be well.